Bungie's brought back 26 exotic weapons from D1 into D2, and they've actually done a pretty good job of keeping their identities. 8 of those 26, however, were changed when they came back to this game, so you and I are going to put them head to head and vote on which game did them better. Starting with the Hawkmoon, the 2 main perks in D1 were called Luck in the Chamber and Holding Aces. Funny enough, they basically did the same thing. Luck would make it so that a random bullet in your mag would deal 33% more damage. You didn't know when it was going to happen throughout your shots in the mag, but all of a sudden, that lucky bullet would come and deal 126 damage to the head. With Holding Aces, it was literally the same thing, except it was a 30% damage bonus and it applied to 2 random bullets instead of 1. So the kicker here was that all 3 of those random bonuses could actually land on the same bullet and stack. You'd get that sexy 223 damage one-shot kill. In D2, they didn't want it to be such an RNG fest, so Bungie changed it to Paracasual, where every headshot slowly builds up towards that one-hit kill. Once you've reached 6 stacks, you can intentionally rain down on your opponent in a split-second decision. Not to mention in D2, we also have the ability to chase what we want for the second core perk of the weapon, which in this case has a ton of amazing choices. So in my mind, I think we gotta chalk up the W for the D2 version, considering it has so much more intention behind it, meaning it's 1-0 for Destiny 2. Number 2 on the list is the Touch of Malice from the Raid, and wouldn't you know it, I'm here to thank Raid Shadow Legends for sponsoring this video. Because when you talk about endgame content, the Doom Tower is some of the toughest they've got. You need to bring your army of champions from one floor to the next through successive challenges until you're at the top, ready to fight and reclaim the tower. Some new things to the game are the Awakening feature and a dungeon called Iron Twins Fortress, where if you can beat the Iron Twins, you gain the ability to awaken your champions, which essentially lets you choose a powerful blessing for them to make them better in your fights. Raid also made the Ultimate Death Knight, which is a legendary version of the community favorite, and you can get him for free if you log in on 7 days between now and October 27th. Plus, they're giving away promo code DK Rises for both new and existing players to upgrade any champion to level 50. On top of all this, Raid's got a promotion for new players joining within the next 30 days, where you can unlock the champion Tyrell. You'll get $30 worth of items like 200k silver, an energy refill, an XP boost, and 1 ancient shard. All you got to do is click the link in the description or scan the QR code within 30 days to get your hands on everything that I've talked about and have it waiting for you in your game's inbox. Next up is Touch of Malice, which is fairly new to D2 with Kingsfall Raid that just came out. The exotic perk is actually the same for D1 and D2, where once you're down to that final round, you can shoot infinitely, dealing bonus damage as long as you don't let it kill you in the process. Is it process or process? In D1, you had a perk called Touch of Mercy that gave you health after 3 rapid kills, which was clearly built right into D2's exotic version. And then even Eye of the Storm from D1 was sorta haphazardly emulated by our new catalyst, giving rapid hit in D2. But what changed? Well, the elephant in the room is probably that big blight thing, wouldn't you say? After hitting 10 headshots, you charge up a ball of darkness, where if you hold reload, it'll let you shoot a blight at someone doing 2 things. First is the fact that it just does some damage, cool. But second is the fact that it debuffs the enemy and they become stunned for a bit, while your weapon deals an extra 50% damage beyond the Touch of Malice perk, meaning it all stacks for 3 times the damage per bullet. And when you put these side by side, I think it's pretty clear that Bungie did a good job in maintaining the nostalgia from D1 while still finding a way to elevate its ability in D2. So I think that makes it 2-0 for today's game. But what about the Pulse Rifle Red Death? Are you happy that it came back as sort of this hybrid hand cannon sidearm pulse thing, or do you wish it stayed as is? In D1, it was a 360 archetype pulse, and its exotic perk was simply that getting a kill would heal you and make your reload extremely fast. The secondary part was unflinching, which, let me tell you, in D1, that perk was extremely noticeable on Red Death. It felt like an absolute laser that could not be knocked off target because of the 33% reduction that single perk was giving you. Now in D2, they brought it back as this hybrid, right? Like I was saying before, and its exotic perk named Banned Weapon was literally that, the fact that it was this pulse shooting sidearm hand cannon thing. Cruel Remedy is what mimics the D1 Red Death perk, and something different that was probably a good call is that on the kill that you get, instead of just making it a super fast reload, it'll straight up refresh your mag so long as it was a precision. At first, these couldn't feel more different, being the fact that one is a pulse and one is a hand cannon, but they've tried to close that gap, I think, by using a catalyst giving you plus 20 range to sort of push out the effective playstyle near to what it was in Red Death and D1 maybe, but I'm still not sure how I feel about it. I know Crimson is very popular on controller, but with so many hand cannons dominating Destiny right now, I feel like it was a lost opportunity to bring back a killer pulse rifle like Red Death. So I'm giving my vote to Destiny 1. Number 4 is Ace of Spades. It had a perk called Third Eye for that radar while you're aiming down sights. That's built into D2's exotic perk. It had Firefly, which we also see today, and then even the high caliber rounds were matched too. The difference was that a perk called Maverick was essentially changed into Memento Mori, and it's kind of cool how the inspiration worked. You see, Maverick made it so every headshot you landed would return 1 round to the mag. This was pretty slick when you were dealing with a mob of ads, and I think you'll see how they tied that inspiration into the new version. In D2, once you get a kill, you reload and then you get this thing called Memento Mori, right? Well, think of it as just making those rounds that are coming from the reserve into the mag as these transformed and special ones that are going to deal extra damage. As we all know, once that perk is active, you pretty much feel unstoppable because it deals 30% more damage, turning those 70s into 90s, allowing for a 1 crit 2 body 3 tap on a 140 RPM hand cannon. Now, it's gone through a couple of iterations in this game as well that I bet people aren't aware of, like the fact that you used to be able to keep it while swapping, but now it goes away. The fact that Mori's damage buff used to give you 93s to the head, dealing more than the 110 RPMs back in the day. Or how about that bonus damage being resilient to damage drop off across an entire map until Shadowkeep? Either way though, it's in a pretty special place right now, and the most important fact is that you can use it on any character. Cause in D1, it was a hunter exclusive exotic. You could not use this on any of the other characters. So all in all, while I prefer the sound of Ace in D1 and wish they would have kept that a little more similar, I do think that our score is now 3-1 for Destiny 2. But let's talk about the Telesto. Yes, this thing is rather iconic in D2 as it's gone sentient somehow with its ability to implode on every iteration of patch that Bungie seems to place. In D2, we know it is the fusion shooting void bolts that stick to a surface lasting for 5 seconds until they explode, all thanks to that perk Unplanned Reprieve. Harbinger's Pulse means that multi-kills will refresh the mag and a catalyst will bump up your ammo capacities. Let's also not forget, of course, the fact that it's resistant to damage fall off, which is part of what makes this thing so unique after all. Destiny 1's version of Unplanned Reprieve was the same, but Harbinger's was actually named Spark, not Pulse. It didn't share the reload mechanic that we know today, and instead it actually created orbs for your teammates on those multi-kills. I think it's pretty clear now why D2 changed it with the fact that they had masterwork weapons doing that, but it's worth noting in D1 that those bumps to your super bar were actually massive and it was a huge advantage. Another difference was the fact that it had Battle Runner, and I swear it was unique on this weapon as well. When you'd get a kill with Telesto in D1, your sprint speed was off the charts. Like, I think they tried to match that by making it a lightweight with the sprint bonus in D2, but I'm telling you, it felt way faster in D1. And all in all, when you put them side by side, yes, this one is the king of memory in D2. I'm handing the win over to the D1 version for its weapon traits. Number 6 on the docket is all about the Thorn. This poor thing has gone through more changes in its history than the amount of videos on Nomad's entire YouTube channel. Speaking of whom, he just got married, so make sure to throw him a congrats when you can. Thorn went through so many changes that I made a half-hour movie about the damn thing, just explaining how it went from a 2-tapping tyrant all the way to a worthless weapon slot and then back again. In its early days, you would shoot someone and Mark of the Devourer would literally burn them with 6 ticks of 7 damage, okay? Imagine a 42 post-burn damage to your hand cannon. Bungie ended up coming to their senses and making some tweaks to it, but they just didn't stop, eventually landing on 4 ticks of 2 damage. The piece that I think a lot of people forget is the fact that it had final round, meaning when you were getting low on the mag, your final bullet would deal 33% damage and often clutch your kill anyways. It's like, imagine having a guaranteed 2-stack of Paracasual on the Hawkmoon, but for Thorn. In D2, while it's definitely a fan favorite for a lot of the veterans coming from D1, it's pretty safe to say on paper that they completely neutered this with the fact that the damage from the burn only deals 0.4 per tick. You can shoot someone 3 times, see 12 ticks of damage, but only actually deal 5 to their HP. That in itself kind of kills the entire identity of the weapon if you think about it. But it's not all negative. I will hand it to them for trying to relive that 2-tap nostalgia by changing Final Round into the whole new perk called Soul Devourer. That's the green orb that you see after a kill, where if you pick it up, your mag gets reloaded a little bit and the burn damage is then boosted up to around 6.5 damage. And while I think that mechanic is super cool, Thorn just doesn't quite carry that weight like it did back in D1. So all in all, the scales are tipped in the direction of D1, making it a 3-3 tie. And with that, I have a question. Are you subbed to the channel? Because I'm right here and my goal is to get to here by the end of the year. That's 3 months for me to gain like 20,000, so I know it's a big goal, but I'm pushing as hard as I can. So if you enjoy this content, please consider subscribing. And with the score being 3-3, let's talk about No Time to Explain. Today's game sees it as one of the most used weapons because of how powerful Time Slip is, which funny enough isn't even the exotic perk. Hitting headshots builds up that stack where once you reach 10, you activate Time Slip, giving you that little pseudo arc buddy dealing 30 damage pulse bursts right next to you. The actual exotic trait is just the fact that getting headshots against slowed or frozen people will give you ammo back, which is likely because it released at the launch of Beyond Light when all of the ice was introduced in this game. It's an absolute beast of a weapon in D2, but how does it differ from D1? Well, back then, the Rewind Again perk was similar with the fact that landing headshots would return ammo to the mag, but it was way better back then since they didn't need to be frozen or slowed considering there was no stasis in the picture. The main difference here, which is a big one, is the fact that instead of Time Slip, you had Headseeker, a completely laughable perk because we sure as hell know that ain't no Time Slip. Dealing a body shot bullet makes the last 2 parts of that particular burst deal more damage. And sure, it allowed you to land some 2 bursts, which was kind of up the alley of Time Chasm anyway, but way more inconsistent. I think it goes without saying that we got to make it 4-3 for D2. And finally, that leaves us the Vex Mythoclast. Boy, oh boy, how do we treat this one? Because it might actually take the cake for the all-time strongest weapon to ever hit the Crucible. I'm talking way more dominant than even Lord of Wolves in its peak of D2. That thing was patched in October of 2014, and the game had only come out in September with the raid launch being near the end. It would shred people so fast it was incomprehensible. But to compare the 2 versions side by side, Timeless Mythoclast is the same thing, just making it a fusion auto rifle hybrid, right? In D1, it was a 375 RPM, unique to its kind, similar to D2, how it acts as a unique 390 RPM shot. Back then, it had a perk called Crowd Control, which just gave you a 15% damage buff for getting a kill without needing to even reload. The catch was the fact that it would disappear within 3 seconds of getting it, so it was kind of meant for crowds of ads. Bungie obviously wanted to maintain that a little bit with D2, so they just named it Calculated Balance and slapped it on the catalyst. And I remember an interview with the devs where they talked about bringing this gun back, they had to be very careful, right? They didn't want it to have that insane dominance in PvP like it did when it launched in D1, but if it came back kind of lackluster, people would just complain about it. So they tried to do something unique, and I think they nailed it with Temporal and Limiter. That's the part that comes into play where each kill will kind of overcharge the weapon, right? Allowing you to build up those ticks to a point where you can hold reload and convert the weapon into a linear fusion rifle. This, in my opinion, was such a cool way to bring it back in a special way while maintaining the nostalgia, keeping it near the top of the totem pole in PvP, but not so much that it's making people back out of every match as fast as Season 18. I gotta say, folks, that makes it 5-3 for D2, but can we talk about the heat-seeking on Truth? I think this clip from Lucky 10P speaks for itself, where D1 takes the cake.
Yes!